Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to All Era Sports with Sir Hunt live on the X platform, coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful 6th of January 2026. The New Year's full rolling underway. Yes, I slipped. I still remember my old brand, but I said it's all new. Still trying to get used to this new feature. So lots to get to here tonight. Black Friday, of course, and historical night in for a Cincinnati icon, and of course, more news out of the situation in uh, with Anthony Joshua. Interesting news that came out earlier today. I don't know if it's real or not, but I'll go ahead and discuss it. Let's go ahead and get right down to it. It's of course Black Friday. It's Black Friday overall, but technically it's Black Monday for the NFL coaching staff. The firings all over the place. Of course, the big one in Baltimore, I'll touch on that here in a minute. I'm going to start with the ones that took place yesterday. Some of them not surprising. A couple of head scratchers, but at the end, maybe they were not. Of course, start with Cleveland. It was the firing of two-time Coach of the Year, Kevin Stefanski. I hope Browns fans are happy because they wanted him out. Kevin Stefanski, essentially in Cleveland, was a scapegoat. Anybody with a brain knows this. Because he essentially was, if you put it in this context, the scapegoat for the worst trade in sports history when the Browns forked out all that draft capital to get Deshaun Watson from Houston. And we know what happened there afterwards. And everybody in Cleveland points the blame at Kevin Stefanski. And because the Cleveland fans pointed the blame at Kevin Stefanski, he's out. And it's a bit of an eyebrow raiser. We've acquired two-time head coach of the year. I mean, it got you the playoff win over Pittsburgh and got you the only two playoff appearances you've had over the last, 20 years. Maybe everyone like 3 or 4 times in the playoffs since they came back in 99. Got you your lone win against Pittsburgh and in the 2020 wildcard game. And the Cleveland Browns fans wanted him out. They wanted him out. It doesn't make it. That's something I can't wrap my head around, especially when we consider he had his quarterback in Baker Mayfield, but the Browns organization wanted Deshaun Watson because they love predators, and because the Cleveland fans and Browns ownership love predators, that's why we had what we had yesterday in Cleveland, and Stefanski is out. I mean, probably the best coach the Browns ever had since they came back into the league, bar none. It's not even close. And they were so hell-bent on wanting him out. Hopefully they're happy, and nobody can find a replacement that can do something of significance because, one, Kevin Stefanski was a scapegoat, largely because the Browns fans set him up to fail, and because the Browns fans loved to see him fail and wanted him to see him fail. And that's why what took place yesterday in Cleveland happened. And hopefully everybody's happy with it. Plain and simple. We'll see what happens. Stefanski's going to get interviews. I think he's going to get a head coaching job somewhere. Talking about interviewing with the Giants and the Titans. I think the Giants might be a good fit for him. And he'll be back in the head coaching biz here soon. But let's not act like Kevin Stefanski was this bum of the month like Cleveland fans pointed him out to be, because he was better than people thought. It's just the Browns are the Browns. Browns fans are Browns fans, and they wanted to see him fail in the worst way possible, and they did. And they were grateful for winning the playoff game in 2020, and it wasn't good enough for them, and they haven't told us why. So hopefully the Browns are finally happy that they lost a good man and a really decent coach in Kevin Stefanski, and let's see where they go moving forward. Because it's a case now of a long road possibly getting longer, but that's what the Browns fans want. There's one of them. Of course, the other one is with the Raiders. Pete Carroll, one and done. Actually, I was surprised he came back to the coaching realm last season. I mean, he came back. I figured he'd be one and done. Actually, I was surprised he came back. I don't know whose idea it was to bring him in anyways. I mean, they needed somebody with a fresher mind. And I'm not sure Pete Carroll was it. I think it was largely because of his connections with Geno Smith. But We know how that turned out for the second time. Remember what happened when those two were in Seattle? Theoretically, it cost Pete Carroll his job over there. And he goes to the Raiders for 1 year. But as I said, I was surprised that he got the job over there last season. It was like out of nowhere. So maybe you shouldn't be surprised he was one and done at the age he was. Maybe for his sake now he can just retire and just go back to a consulting role, something that he had in Seattle after he retired. So that's what we have there with the Raiders. Going to be an interesting opportunity. Everybody wants it, but aside of Alshon Jeffrey and Max Crosby, what do you have? You're going to have the number 1 overall pick, but who's going to be the number 1 pick? I mean, that's probably the only thing that entices people, someone to coach to that team. But you're still the 4th best in that division. I mean, Kansas City, Denver, and the Chargers are still miles ahead of you. And everybody acts like it's an attractive job. That really isn't. There lies the problem. Yeah, you got the number 1 overall pick, but it's good enough to be the number 1 overall pick. I don't know. I don't even know what the draft class is. It's that bad. So Pete Carroll is done. But again, it was surprising he actually was hired more than the one and done being fired. So that's what the Las Vegas Raider brass was all about. Of course, earlier this year, the Titans firing Brian Callahan. They're starting their search. Arizona firing Jonathan Gannon. Sudden surprise, but maybe in hindsight, it was not. I mean, they signed everybody and they drafted well, but you was relying on a post-ACL version of Kyler Murray to try and get you someplace you haven't been in quite a while. And when you're relying on somebody like that, and even before that, his track record wasn't all that great, it's another case of a scapegoat situation. And Jonathan Gannon, maybe for his sake moving forward, because remember success in Philadelphia when he was a defensive coordinator, especially the year when they took Philadelphia to the Super Bowl in the loss of Kansas City in 2022. Maybe for him, not sure about a head coach, but maybe a defensive coordinator gig might be better for him at this point, because some coordinators are better as coordinators than they are head coaches. And maybe moving forward, that might be the best case for Jonathan Gannon. Because Arizona's franchise is every bit laughing stock of the Cincinnati Bengals, and somewhat, I get it. But they did draft well. They did sign free agents well, put together, at least on paper, a decent roster to compete. But when you have the quarterback like a Kyler Murray, who's basically at the almost approaching expiration date status in terms of his NFL career, if he hasn't already, you're setting a coach up to fail, and that's what happened in Arizona. It's going to be a bit of an attractive opportunity. Question is going to be who's going to be their quarterback. If they're still thinking about riding with Kyler Murray after this season, somebody upstairs needs to check for CTE, because his 5 minutes of fame were up when he got begrudged in that NFC wildcard game against the Rams, and the party was over. And now he's in expiration date status in the NFL as a quarterback. So I got to say about that. Many others that took place earlier. John Morton, the offensive coordinator, fired by Dan Campbell, which Campbell took the offensive play calling opportunities away from him. Goes in line again to show you that maybe Ben Johnson meant more to Dan Campbell than people thought. And he was already viewed as the one that almost sort of, at least perception-wise, bailed out Dan Campbell as an offensive coordinator when he was there. And we saw the success he had in Chicago. So that's what we have with that one. A few others, but that's some of the crux of what we had. Which now leads us to the big news of the day in Baltimore. In hindsight, actually, let me back up. It's a stunner across the league, maybe given the longevity and the strong infrastructure structure of an organization like the Baltimore Ravens. But maybe in hindsight, given what's happened over the last 3 to 4 years, maybe we should have seen this coming. But maybe probably the best for both as the Baltimore Ravens and John Harbaugh go their separate ways. I mean, sometimes when you have the early success like Harbaugh had, I mean, he started with an 8-4 playoff record, won the Super Bowl in 2012, with Joe Flacco carrying the weight, and you had that success, and of course you draft Lamar Jackson, and you had regular season success, but your postseason success is on the flip. But when you have the early success in the coaching realm, and not saying just the NFL, I can say for a lot of sports, because there's some coaches for the longest time that probably have, in his own way, worn out their welcome, but because of early success, it's like their job security. This is the same case here. You probably say after losing to Kansas City in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, that should have been it, because there's a trend over the last 4 to 5 years during his time in Baltimore. Big complementary football, situational football, ability to manage the game. We talk about it with players, even as coaches too. There were many times where John Harbaugh just left it on the table and let someone snatch the food. That's what it came down to. When you're having 10, 15, 20-point leads and blowing them the way he had. And this season, many, many games that you had the opportunity to put it away or win it and can't do it. And with the personnel you had over the last 3 to 4 years, that should tell you what's going on. And when that is the common denominator, when you talk about John Harbaugh and what's happened over the last 4 years in Baltimore, a decision had to be made. And after what happened Sunday night in Pittsburgh, with basically a chance to win the AFC North title and go to the playoffs, and how that was sort of mismanaged down the stretch before the missed kick by Tyler Loop, maybe Baltimore just said, it's time for a fresh face. I understand it. Now, I get everybody is shocked because he's been there for 18 years. I mean, listen, the first half of his career was pretty solid. He won the Super Bowl, and people thought he was going to be a Raven for life. But we think of what's happened over the last few years, putting the roster together the way they did, and not being able to get over the hump. Somebody had to take the fall, and at the end of the day, it was John Harbaugh. A lot of reasons for it. I'll leave that to the Ravens fans, because a lot of jubilance over there. I understand it. Maybe time for a fresh face at some point, but it's going to be interesting to see who they bring in. I mean, the names I heard are Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Chargers, and of course, Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator from Minnesota, who deserves another chance after the fiasco in Miami, who just did him blood dirty, including Tua turned the ball over, who did him dirty. That's going to probably be the options. Everybody's acting like Jesse Minster's already going to be the coach over there. I don't know if I will go that far, because I don't know who they're interviewing or who they're considering. But for Baltimore, if you're going to do this, you better bring in somebody who's going to demand accountability, because it's now or never. I said that for the last couple of years with them under John Harbaugh, and moving forward, it's going to be the same thing. Because next season, you're going to have a near $75 million cap hit for Lamar Jackson, which I expect that to be taken care of in the offseason. I don't think the Ravens can go into next season with that sort of a wild cap number. And when that happens, it's basically now get this thing going in the right direction. And it starts with turning around a defense who the last 2 seasons has been fried despite stretches of good football. But grand scheme of things, they've been fried in big moments, in big situations. And that's where it's going to have to begin. They're probably going to need a defensive mind. That's why I think why they're considering Minter, and why I think Brian Flores would be a better fit. And that's where it's going to have to start. Because you're going to go to the back end of Lamar Jackson's career, and if you can't get anything out of this over the next couple of years, it might be time to hit the total reset button and start the whole thing over. And I don't know if Raven fans would want to go with that, because they just transitioned from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson. And where they're going to go after Lamar Jackson, if it goes to that point, raises questions. Excuse me. So, yeah, it was a bit of a stunner when you consider John Harbaugh being a fixture for Baltimore for many years. And you thought maybe winning the Super Bowl early was his job security. He was going to be a Raven for life. But maybe somebody in the Baltimore brass saw something that nobody saw, and that's why they parted ways. And maybe a fresh face for the Ravens organization and a new change of scenery for Baltimore, for John Harbaugh, excuse me, might be what the doctor ordered for both. Good luck to both. And speaking of coaching stability, I touched on a bit on it yesterday. I'll just touch on it a little bit again, because once again, the Cincinnati media wants to bring it up. It was the presser yesterday, the ChatGPT post on the Cincinnati Bengals websites, basically saying they're going to keep Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor. Think it's the old adage, continuity breeds content. After what happened earlier tonight, and now we're hearing this, once again, another conversation, I'll just go brief with this, is the fact that the Bengals and the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, the biggest group of puppets for Mike Brown, shows themselves again because they are content with what they have. And it's the perception of being too cheap to get a quality coach for an offense who you have three guys paid over $120 million to over the next several years. And after missing the playoffs 3 straight years, it seemed like with this, they're fine with just missing the playoffs and having a bad investment. And that's a problem. And when Mike Brown came out with his chat GPT post on all the social media platforms earlier yesterday, that's the impression we got. Because it seemed like they're content with 9-8 seasons, which in a 17 game season is essentially like going 8-8 or 7-9. And they're content with just going 9-8. As I said last night to all the Mike Brown puppets known as the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, if you guys go 9-8, it's guaranteed Zach Taylor's going to get an extension, much to everybody's chagrin. Unless you're Mike Brown and a Zach Taylor puppet, which is 90% of the Bengals fan base. And once that happens, it's going to be just an embarrassing ride. I said this guy should have been let go after the 2023 season, the year after they lost to Kansas City in the AFC title game. But here we are. The guy's on expiration date status. He has the most embarrassing press conferences, not just the one after the loss to Cleveland, even had the one yesterday where it's almost like a carbon copy of what he had in his exit interview last year, almost word for word. I don't know if I was watching a real press conference or just a replayed carbon copy of last year, because that's exactly what it was. Almost word for word. And any smart NFL fan that's not a Bengals fan or a Cincinnati media member knows it. And that's why what happened yesterday with all of this just fell off the rails. And today, apparently there's an article from one of the more the clown Cincinnati media member named Paul Denner Jr., who basically said it's that retaining Zach Taylor was the right decision. Question is, why is this the right decision? Is it because you guys love the guy? Because Paul Denner Jr. is a Zach Taylor puppet, just like a lot of people in the Cincinnati community. How are you going to justify having three guys and missing the playoffs? Three guys being paid the figure they're about to be paid, missing the playoffs 3 straight years, and all of a sudden come out and say what Mike Brown said in this chat GPT post on the social media platforms, that is the right decision. And I said this throughout, for the longest time, and I still said it again today. Zero accountability. And because there is zero accountability from everywhere, I'm talking everywhere, the ownership to members in the front office, to the players, the coaches, the fans, the super fans, and the Cincinnati media, nobody there is holding themselves or each other accountable. And because of it, we're about to have a 4th straight year of this team toying with mediocrity, and you're about to hit the worst status you don't ever want to hit. And that's called being a treadmill team if you're not on there already. Because that's what's about to happen over the next several years if nobody tries to show any kind of accountability. And let me remind you, 9-8, I guess, is the standard. As Mike Tomlin once said for his Steelers, the standard is the standard. Question is, what is the standard for the Cincinnati Bengals? What's the standard for the Bengals fans, a.k.a. the Mike Brown puppets, or the Cincinnati media members, the Zach Taylor puppets? Too much puppetry has gone on in Cincinnati, and because of the puppets that we have in the community and the puppets that live in Cincinnati and show their puppetry on social media, that's what we have. And that because of all the puppetry, that's why the official announcement was made via chat GPT by Mike Brown when it comes to what to expect in the 2026 season. And until the puppets are held accountable, that's mainly the puppetry of the Bengals fans and the puppetry of the Cincinnati media. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's my all-time favorite quotes. Nothing changes if nothing changes. I'm prepared for that in Cincinnati. I mean, you guys already found a way to crash the Titanic into the iceberg, and you find a way to blow up worse than Hindenburg. I don't know what's next on the docket. I think you're about to have your own litigated disaster because you're treated that way. And not even, as I said before, not even Enron mismanaged their business and financial aspects the way you guys have over the last 3 years. And it's come crashing and burning. And it seemed like nobody wants to do anything about stopping it. And just you want to crash and burn, and you're okay with it. That's been the problem. And I don't know what to tell you guys at this point. I'll be touching more on that when I talk about the NFL offseason show closer to the draft. Because I already have a big plan with this new show. A lot of things for the NFL and offseason stuff. But when it comes to Cincinnati, it's going to be a bucket list. And I've said many times before, and I'll say it again. I don't care if you like me or not. I'm not here to make friends because I'm not, when I put this microphone on, I'm not a fan. My fandom is not on social media or with a microphone. I keep that away from it. Once this is on, it's a different animal. You better do something if you're serious about winning. Instead of just calling Mike Brown every name of the book on social media, like what the puppets of Bengals fans and Cincinnati media like to do, how about go to Mike Brown in person and take care of it yourself? I'll sit back and wait. These 2 eyes to be the dictator. So that takes care of the NFL segment of the night. Tomorrow night will be the picks for the playoff games. I will mention those, talk about a whole bunch of other stuff. Quick news out of the NBA is Nikola Jokic supposed to be back by the end of January. Godspeed. Premier big man of the NBA. I mean, of course, there's Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio. but still, the nod goes to Jokic for now. Fortunate it wasn't worse than what it was, and he has every intention to be back before the month's over with. So get well soon and get back on the court. The NBA is a better league with him on it. Now to the world of boxing. As you want to start with the historical aspect today. And from the bad of Cincinnati to the great of Cincinnati. This event that took place 75 years ago tonight at Madison Square Garden. It was another successful heavyweight title defense by Ezzard Charles against a fighter named Lee Oma. About Lee Oma, we'll get here in a second. Lee Oma, when you talk about him, how he got to this point. He was one of those guys, his record doesn't tell the story about him. As he was better than what he was. He found a way to get himself as high as number 3 in the world at one point in the heavyweight division. And he was at number 5 in 1949. And found his way to get a title shot against Ezzard Charles, who, after the longest reign at light heavyweight, ventured up to heavyweight because he couldn't get a title shot at light heavyweight and got out of heavyweight. And of course, after beating Jersey Joe Walcott twice and eventually beating a coming out of retirement Joe Louis, Ezzard Charles continued his march into heavyweight history against a very sturdy fighter named Lee Oma. When you talk about Lee Oma, nicknamed the Fighting Bartender, had a 3-decade career, and this was probably his lone title shot out of it. We talk about a guy who played on the bartender on the waterfront with Marlon Brando. That should tell you what the talent this guy had. And facing Ezzard Charles, this was a fight where, he worked to get to this point, but it was a case, once again, of why Ezzard Charles is one of the great pugilists in boxing history. And he showed it here, where he just found a way to show his skill, breaking down the tissues, going to the body of Lee Oma, gradually breaking him down. And Lee Oma, who was courageous and just fought a valiant effort, and who was a fan favorite, who was loved. But Charles's skill was just so far ahead that it started to become a beating. And we talk about the 10th round stoppage, the stoppage out of nowhere. It was, of course, the end where a double left hook stopped him and basically put an end to it. Oma beat the count, but he was wobbled to his corner, and as the referee was stopping it, the corner would come in. And another success of the heavyweight championship, Ezzard Charles basically dominates a tough, popular fighter named Lee Oma to retain the heavyweight championship. Ezzard Charles has a claim to the greatest light heavyweight in boxing history, even though he never fought or won a title. The number 1 Cincinnati icon. But we talk about his heavyweight history, probably top 15, top 20. I mean, you don't make 8 successful title defenses of a championship having wins over guys like Jersey Joe Walcott, Pat Valentino, Lee Oma, and of course Joe Louis, albeit under odd circumstances, and does not be nobody. The master of the sweet science for his time, and we talk about a pugilist of the sweet science for that time, few, if any, matched Ezzard Charles. There's a reason he was nicknamed the Cincinnati Cobra for a reason, and he showed it here. Just out of nowhere, just after just gradually just breaking down Lee Oma, turned it up with the left hooks, and stopped him to retain the title at Madison Square Garden 75 years ago. That tells you just what Ezzard Charles was made of. I mean, he had to, of course, he eventually lost 2 fights to Jersey Joe Walcott to even that series at 2-2, but gave Rocky Marciano the 2 toughest fights of his career The second fight, of course, looked like he was going to win it because he started bloody Rocky Marciano's face, but Marciano came on. But maybe his greatest distinction as a heavyweight, when we talk about Ezzard Charles, was being the only heavyweight to go the 15-round distance with Marciano during Marciano's heavyweight title reign. And Ezzard Charles was a master of the ring. And James Toney brought up all the things Ezzard Charles does boatload of times. Master of his craft, the shoulder roll, the slip and stay in the pocket and counter. That's what made Ezzard Charles great. And he did it here against Ali Oma, who worked hard to get to a spot and a deserved title shot, but was just woefully overmatched. And few, if any, during that time could match Ezzard Charles. And that's what he did to Lee Oma 75 years ago. And we talk about his place in light heavyweight history. I've said it before. The greatest fight in that division, probably not the greatest prime. That probably belongs to Billy Conn. And Archie Moore's prime was more later, because he was one of those guys that just found ways to get better. But where Charles trumps them is, of course, the 3 wins over Archie Moore. And because of it, his prime was maybe not far behind Billy Conn's, but was longer. And because it was longer, that's why he gets that distinction, even though he never had a chance. He fought for the light heavyweight championship, and there are a boatload of reasons for it. A part of it, of course, is the wild business he had with Gus Lasinovich, who was a light heavyweight champ at the time. Odd to talk about. I'm not even going to bring it up. Because in terms of the fact you're talking about the greatest light heavyweight in boxing history, widely regarded with that distinction. And among the fighters he beat in that weight class, you talk about Joey Maxim and Charlie Burley, among many others. And Ezzard Charles, that's why he had the distinction. But when he moved up to heavyweight, won the title from Jersey Joe Walcott, his reign at heavyweight was as good as anyone's. I mean, top 15. I mean, not stand as some of the other guys, because you talk about a boatload of heavyweights with more significant accomplishments. But Ezzard Charles made 8 successful title defenses of the heavyweight championship. He did something right in that division, so he deserves credit for doing something with that. That's the reason why he went from light heavy to heavyweight, because he wanted a shot at the title. And after Joe Louis retired, it was him and Walcott the first time, and Ezzard Charles got the decision and finally reached the pedestal and probably the highlight peak moment of his career. And his place in Cincinnati sports history, still number 1. I mean, the mural up there, literally like 70 miles, the equivalent of 75,000 feet long to 150,000 feet high. It's that big. The mural, the street named after him on the west side off of Interstate 75, about just on the other side of where TQL Stadium is, Ezzard Charles Drive. The park a few years ago, which was known as Laurel Park, renamed to Ezzard Charles, and they have all kinds of celebrations that celebrate Ezzard Charles. And the statue at the park where I was there last year to do a show on his 80-year anniversary of beating Archie Moore at Music Hall, that's the iconism of Ezzard Charles. We talk about the great Cincinnati athletes, and he's still recognized to this day with that distinction. And anybody is out in the west side, I encourage you to go to Ezzard Charles Park. Not the biggest park in the world. Nothing is going to wow you or, make the highlight reels of the most beautiful parks. But in terms of the pure history and the pure significance of what Ezzard Charles brought to Cincinnati and why he is nicknamed the Cincinnati Cobra and is still the number 1 icon in Cincinnati sports history, I encourage you to go over there and check it out. Because even though it was a small park, just the thought of seeing and revisioning what Ezzard Charles did during his time in his fight career, and some of the things he was outside of it as the terrific humanitarian, says a lot about his impact. And I mentioned before, we talk about the Cincinnati icons. He's always going to be number 1. Oscar Robertson, the Cincinnati basketball player. Of course, we talk about in the area of boxing. Aaron Pryor, became one, especially when he obliterated Antonio Cervantes at Pack Riverfront Coliseum. Now, whatever the frick the name of arena it is. Of course, Johnny Bench and Joe Morgan and Barry Larkin, 3 Cincinnati icons for the Cincinnati Reds. Ken Anderson and Anthony Munoz, the icons for the Cincinnati Bengals. And of course, Luciano Lucho Acosta, who put the soccer team FC Cincinnati on the map for the few years he was here before he got traded to whatever team he got traded to, but brought a pizzazz to Cincinnati at a time when the Reds and the Bengals just fell off the rails, but kept Cincinnati sports going. And that's why Luciano Lucho Acosta deserves the distinction of a Cincinnati icon. Better put a stadium out there, TQL Stadium, for him. But other than all of that, there's only one that stands out. That's the Cincinnati Cobra, Ezzard Charles. And it was 75 years ago where he gradually broke down a tough, durable, deserving contender in Lee Oma, stopped him in the 10th round with just an explosive bunch of left hooks out of nowhere to retain the heavyweight championship and to continue his march in heavyweight boxing history after he cemented his place as the greatest light heavyweight in boxing history. There's a lot of stuff about Ezzard Charles out there, especially if you guys are living on the west side of Cincinnati. I encourage you to check it out. And speaking of heavyweight history, one that took place in the more modern times took place 35 years ago tonight in Atlantic City. And this is why they say one punch in the heavyweight division changes things. And this fight was a perfect example of it. This was Francesco Damiani defending a fake heavyweight championship from Italy, going to the backyard of Ray Mercer. The tough, durable Ray Mercer, the 1988 Olympic gold medalist who just wiped out the competition, it was coming off a life and death fight against Burt Cooper, where basically he had his face rearranged and a jaw broke. Fought a deceptively skilled Francesco Damiani, who is not going to win the physique battle because he was anything but was deceptive in his skill, maybe in his ability and his quickness, and carved out a decent career in Italy and was coming in for a potential cash out, trying to throw himself in the middle of what was about to become a red-hot heavyweight division. And this fight had all kinds of questions going in both ways, especially after how Mercer had that life and death struggle with Burt Cooper, where he had a broken jaw, and he's taking on one of the more skilled fighters at the time, more underrated. We talk about Francesco Damiani, so no one's going to mistake him for having the physique of a fighter like Frank Bruno, but a very skilled, not great in one area, but did a lot of things very good. And we do a lot of things very good, you could actually get to a point to where you could be great. And on this particular night, he dished it to Ray Mercer every single which way possible for the first eight and a half rounds. I mean, he outskilled him, he outpunched him, cut Mercer's lip, started to bust him up, had the fight under control, and it looked like he was going to be on his way to another successful title defense of that fake heavyweight championship. Again, because of the boxing politics, not because of Francesco Damiani, that was a fake heavyweight championship. But this is why it's a heavyweight division. This is why Ray Mercer was one of the pure toughest SOBs to ever get into a boxing ring, because about halfway through round 9, like a half left hook, half uppercut that didn't look like much, right on the nose of Francesco Damiani. And Francesco Damiani just gradually rolls over, falls down to his face, and has his gloves underneath his face, holding onto his nose. And out of nowhere, in a fight that he was losing quite badly, that haymaker, half hook, half uppercut by Ray Mercer wins him that championship on a 9th round knockout in a fight where he was getting handed to him, but a punch that didn't look like much on the replay turns out to shatter Francesco Damiani's nose all over the place. And that's why it's a heavyweight division. They say one punch can turn the fight. You better watch this one, because that's what it hit. And I don't know what the hell to say about that punch because you watch it for the first time in real motion. It didn't look like a real punch. It didn't look like a real hard punch or one that could shatter somebody's nose. Not great. These are 200+ pound men. I'm 170+ pounds. So it would have shattered my nose. I'll acknowledge that. But the half hook, half uppercut by Ray Mercer out of nowhere after being just thoroughly beaten by Francesco Damiani to put Damiani down on the front position with his gloves down and his nose in the middle of the gloves as if his nose was shattered. Tells you why they fight the fights and why Ray Mercer was as tough as they come. And to land that kind of a punch to just finish off a very strong, durable, and skilled Francesco Damiani to win that championship says a lot to who Ray Mercer was at the end of the day on that night up to that point. As I said, up to that point, because after that fight, the career of Ray Mercer just got interesting. Good and bad. Let's just start with the good. I mean, he begrudged Tommy Morrison after Morrison was just battering him like a drum. And of course, begrudged Tommy Morrison with that 17 unanswered punches against the ropes. The last 7 where Morrison's gloves were on the side and Mercer was flirting with decapitating him. And it looked like he was on top of the world and it was going to be the next big thing for guys like Evander Holyfield or Riddick Bowe or them fighters. But a funny thing happened 4 months after that fight when he was a victim of a jabbing clinic by the greatest jabber in boxing history, Larry Holmes. And after that point, the inconsistencies of Ray Mercer started to show. I mean, he came in that fight 233 pounds, heaviest he ever been, and it showed because he was lethargic. It was a sitting duck for Larry Holmes' left jab. And Holmes has won the unanimous decision going away. He gets a couple more wins. And then that wild fiasco against Jesse Ferguson, where apparently he whispered something into his ear, the equivalent of a bribe, which was shot, which I don't know what the results was. I don't even remember. I don't care for it. But in that fight, he got worked by Jesse Ferguson, and I mean worked. It looked like his career was done at that point, because remember, had he beaten Jesse Ferguson, he would get a title shot against Riddick Bowe, but Jesse Ferguson happened. And then he would have an embarrassing performance against a journeyman named Marion Wilson, who had, I think, like 19 losses at one point, and just did everything to Ray Mercer. But somehow Mercer escaped with a draw in a fight where Marion Wilson just dished it out to him and then some. But after that, he took a little time out, got 2 if you want to call it this, impressive losses against Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis in fights where he gave both of them all he can handle and then some. Asked both Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis what Ray Mercer did to him. And then probably on his way out, his last big win was beating a moderately resurgent Tim Witherspoon by unanimous decision. And it looked like Mercer was starting to get on track a little bit, but the inconsistencies continued. He eventually lose a fight against Shannon Briggs where he was in control, but just got pasted. And the end game in 2002, where he was just dog walked all over the place by Vladimir Klitschko. Ray Mercer's had, excuse me, Ray Mercer was probably a case of a fighter, probably one of the all-time great chins, and that's a no-brainer. I mean, guys would literally hit him, and he would sit there and laugh. And a guy who was very skilled, especially when he came out of winning the gold medal in the '88 Olympics, but never, after he got to a certain point, after he beat Tommy Morrison, when it came time to go to another level, he couldn't do it. And even though he had those impressive losses to Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis, was an example of what he could have been, still we talk about the crux of that career from 91 to 92 to 94, where you talk about losing to Larry Holmes, losing to Jesse Ferguson, and getting a gift draw against Marion Wilson. That's the inconsistencies of Ray Mercer, and that's what he was at the end of the day. But still one of the toughest SOBs to ever lace up the gloves. And anybody who would try to do anything to him, he would sit taking a laugh at you and spit in your face. That's how tough Ray Mercer was. And Francesco Damiani did it. Hit him every single which way possible, doing anything and everything he wanted to. But that half hook, half uppercut right on the tip of Damiani's nose that sent him down, won Ray Mercer the championship. It's probably the biggest win and peak performance of his career. Now, if we talk about, I said Francesco Damiani was trying to make his mark in the States. Never happened. Fought a few more times. Maybe his best known was a fight against a woefully faded Greg Page on the Chavez Camacho undercard, where every time he hit Greg Page loses his mouthpiece. I think he tallied like 9 times Greg Page lost his mouthpiece. That was the end for him. He would have another shot at a title eliminator against Oliver McCall. McCall just beat the brakes off of him. Of course, in there, he had a guaranteed title shot against Evander Holyfield, but was forced to pull that out due to an ankle injury. But a real intriguing career out of Italy. And you can say he was protected. I mean, I get it. No real big name, but he did beat everybody in front of him, with the exception of Mercer and McCall. And he deserves some credit for it. No one's going to put him in the Hall of Fame. No one's saying he's the greatest thing since the Joe Louis run. But a very solid, crafty fighter who knew the ring well, very skilled, and basically anyone that fought him got a handful. Actually, not only get a handful, but he also got a handful of Greg Page's mouthpiece in 1992 that kept going out because every time Damiani hit him. That's to tell you about what Francesco Damiani had. I mean, very deceptive in how he did things. Not a physical specimen. No one's going to mistake him for being having a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger or in the boxing realm like a Frank Bruno. But skill-wise, good and solid. And that's what he was. But that left hook, I'm sure Damiani's nose is still rearranged. Odd because on the surface it didn't look like much, but it shattered his nose so bad he was literally covering his nose when he was face first on the canvas. That's all you need to know what happened with Francesco Damiani losing to Ray Mercer on that night 35 years ago. That's why it's the heavyweight division. One punch can change it. That's probably the epitome of it. Actually, a good skilled fight for both guys. As a must watch if you're interested in the classics. And I conclude with something I talked about last night. And I guess we have people trying to bust out fake news again, so I have to shoot this down real quick. Apparently, there's a rumor flying around that Anthony Joshua is contemplating retirement from the sport after the unfortunate circumstance, life-changing circumstance in Nigeria. Fight followers know what that's all about. Can everybody please leave Anthony Joshua alone and let him heal? Leave him alone and let him heal. Because he got injuries. 2 people, unfortunately, lost their lives. And we have cowards, most notably Deontay Wilder fans, who want to throw insults and accuse him of ducking when it was Deontay Wilder who did the ducking. And they're bringing this out after Anthony Joshua just had a near tragedy to himself. Because one thing we learned about what happened to him in Nigeria is how fragile life is. And the cowards called Deontay Wilder fans need to shut up. Because this man needs to heal. And he just did the world a favor by just pasting an individual, a coward in Miami. We know who that was and what happened on that night. And I know everybody in England wants that Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua fight so bad. Great, should have happened a couple years ago. But I say this to everybody in the fight community who's doing whatever the frick they're doing on social media platforms. I'm calling every single person out. And I'm talking to you, so what? Leave Anthony Joshua alone and let that man heal. He just could have been one of those ones that could have lost his life in that accident, because accidents like that, It can happen to anybody. 2 guys in that accident are no longer with us. It could have happened to Anthony Joshua. It could have. It didn't, but it could have. That's how fragile life is. And all of you cowards in the fight community, most notably Deontay Wilder fans, need to stop being cowards for one. Leave this man alone, give him his respect, and let him heal. Because I don't think fighting's in Anthony Joshua's mind right now. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, I don't think boxing is in Anthony Joshua's mind. I mean, what happened to him, I mean, it could happen to anybody, including the cowards called Deontay Wilder fans. It could have happened to anybody. And I'm sure he knows he should be thanking the man upstairs that he didn't wind up worse than what he did. Because after everything I read, everything that was out there in the news, it could have happened to him. And everybody in the fight community needs to just shut up, leave the man alone, let him heal, let him make his decisions. Because he's got a lot on his mind right now, especially after what happened. I mean, right now, the fighting Tyson Fury is probably the last thing on this guy's mind. I mean, again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. But I probably would say it is. I mean, let this guy heal, not just physically, but mentally. Because having to be in a car with 2 guys who lost their lives, I'm sure there's lots of this young man's mind. Because I don't know what he's going through. But we have cowards called Deontay Wilder fans that are just showing why they're the biggest cowards right now, with a disrespect, the intentional, heartless disrespect to a man who could have lost his life in that accident, show themselves. And if I'm talking to you as a Deontay Wilder fan, so what? You are a coward. Leave Anthony Joshua alone. Let him heal. If he's going to fight again, it's who knows? It happens. The guy needs to heal first. I mean, I'm not talking about just the injuries. I mean, the entire scene that took place in Nigeria that day, because he could have wound up like those 2 guys. Plain and simple. Leave Anthony Joshua alone. Let the man heal. Let him get himself together. And then we'll talk about that other stuff when the time comes. But right now, don't even think about Anthony Joshua in the boxing sense, because he has other things to take care of. And everybody, especially the cowards called Deontay Wilder fans, need to do it. And it's pretty sad I had to do this for a second straight night because of the cowardice of Deontay Wilder fans. Simply put, what this man just went through, and for you to do anything or make any kind of cowardly assumption after what he just went through, says about you as a human being. And it's bad enough we have Mike Tyson fans who have been bad human beings. It's bad enough we had Cincinnati Bengals fans who are bad human beings. Deontay Wilder fans are going to try a way to top them for what they're saying about Anthony Joshua after the supposed retirement rumor. The man could have lost his life, and Deontay Wilder fans show their cowardice by doing this. That's a problem. Let Anthony Joshua get himself together, because he needs to. He can take all the time he wants. I mean, if he miraculously wants to come out next week and says, I'm going to fight Tyson Fury, kudos to him. If he says, I need more time before I can fight Tyson Fury, all for it. Let the man gather himself, get himself together before he chases the opportunity he wants and makes the life and career decisions that he feels right for him. That's all there is to it. Let the man have his peace. If you want to fight, there's a lot of fights and fighters we can talk about throughout the rest of this month. But let's let Anthony Joshua rest, heal, and recover. That's all we need to do right now. It's pretty sad we have to resort to this. It really is. And at a time when everything, one of these, and you post anything for rage bait purposes, but if you're posting rage bait purposes about an individual who almost lost his life in a car wreck, I don't say it's almost, because it was possible Anthony Joshua could have lost his life in that, you're a coward. There's no other way to sugarcoat it, especially Deontay Wilder fans who are the worst. Anthony Joshua needs to heal, and the fight community needs to gather together and to say collectively, we'll wait for Anthony Joshua to heal, and then we'll wait for him to make the decision before we draw to any conclusions, especially in lieu of what happened in Nigeria, because that could have been him. But we know, through the grace of God, nothing worse happened to him. But he needs to heal. He needs a timeout. And everybody in the fight community needs to shut up and let him heal. Case closed. And on that note, that will wrap up tonight's edition of All Era Sports with Sirhan. I encourage everyone, if you want miss this show or any ones of the past, you can catch them, of course, in the iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and the Spotify apps. Also, the launch of the Patreon free website is going to be coming up. No paywalls from me. Everything's going to be free, straight up. And as always, as I tell everybody, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. And I encourage everybody in the fight community to let Anthony Joshua take care of himself first. Because if you take care of yourself first, respect other people's boundaries, and don't let anyone step on your boundaries, all the good things will come your way. And talk about self-care, memo to the fight community for one last time. Let Anthony Joshua take care of himself, let him heal, and let him make the decision of what he wants to do. Because after what happened, he needs to take care of himself first. And on that note, that'll wrap up the show. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. And I will see you tomorrow.